Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I'll give just another minute or two here for people to continue to join in, and then we'll dive in and we'll get started. All right, we will go ahead and get started here. I hope everybody can see my screen. But welcome to this webinar, Winning Back Your Health as a Busy Working Professional. Now, I'm sure many of you that are on this webinar today probably feel very similar to one another, and we're going to kind of explore that today. That as working professionals, we all really struggle with a lot of the same things in terms of prioritizing our health, making ourselves a priority, fitting in, nutrition, exercise, a lot of those different types of things. So, first of all, thank you for being willing to show up today. But also, thank you for prioritizing yourself, right? It takes time to prioritize yourself. And I know that you all have 100 million other things that you could be doing right now, but you're showing up for yourself. So I'm excited for you to be here. And I hope that I'm really able to provide a lot of value for you today and a very unique perspective. This is not, a normal health webinar. So I'm excited to get some feedback and kind of see what you guys think about this. So just to get started, a little bit about me and who in the world I am and why in the world I'm qualified to be jumping on a webinar and sharing this education with you. My name is Whitney Prude. I am a board certified clinical pharmacist. I worked at the Mayo Clinic for about 8 years. I'm still employed there. However, currently I am working full time in my business, Whole and Happy Living. I'm also a Mayo Clinic certified wellness coach. I'm a nationally certified health and wellness coach. I'm also certified in nutrition coaching, as well as pharmacogenomics and medication therapy management. So that's just a little bit about my qualifications and who I am. But truly, my passion is coaching. And you'll learn a little bit more about me and my story and why in the world I went from being a pharmacist to starting my own business and working as a coach, working as a health and wellness coach, and helping working professionals to transform their health. So in most webinars, like I mentioned, a lot of people will dive into proper nutrition. How do we prioritize our nutrition, cooking at home, not stopping by and getting fast food, prioritizing our exercise, making sure we get enough sleep. Stress management is huge. Because we're so busy and we're trying to manage so many things, and also a work-life balance. So we're not working an excessive amount of hours, and then not having a life and not being able to spend time with our families on the back end. So that's what you mostly see in a health webinar. Today is going to be very, very different. So I'm excited to dive a little bit deeper, because in today's webinar, we are actually going to talk about the most common challenges that working professionals face when it comes to prioritizing their health. We're going to talk about why these challenges exist and where they actually come from. And then we're going to talk about the most important strategy for winning your health back and making it a reality now, as well as into the future and into your retirement. Because the last thing that we want to do is to work like crazy for the majority of our lives and get to our retirement when we can finally relax and enjoy, and we end up sick and have health conditions that cripple us and keep us from actually being able to enjoy that time. We basically worked ourselves into a hole, and now we can't even enjoy our retirement. So I want to share a statement about working professionals. And I want you to just listen to this and just think, does this sound familiar? Does this resonate with me? Most working professionals are busy and time is scarce. They are high achievers, often overachievers, and go the extra mile to get things done, even if that means sacrificing their personal time and their overall health. They think that if they just had more time in a day, they could take better care of themselves. But this goes on for years, never making the time to prioritize their own health and eventually starting to develop symptoms with their health that force them to reconsider. I want you to let me know in the chat, is this something that resonates with you? Just give me a yes. Type a yes in there if you feel like, yes, this is, it's accurate. This is what it looks like for working professionals. We see it so often. So let me know in the chat. Just give me a yes if this is something that you resonate with. Now let's talk about what the biggest barriers are that you face as a working professional. I want you to write this in the chat and I want you to share, because I want everyone on here to be able to see what are those things that are common. And I'm not 100% sure if you guys can actually write things in the chat. I think that you can share in the chat, but if not, if I don't see anything come through, then then we'll just talk about them in general and some of the things that I came up with. But go ahead, if you have the ability, go ahead and write in the chat what is one of the biggest barriers that you face as a working professional that keeps you from prioritizing your health. Okay. Now let's talk about some of these things. Time. Time is huge. And it's one of the biggest things that my clients as working professionals struggle with. I don't have enough time to fit more into my day. I don't have time to cook dinner. I don't have time to fit in exercise. I have to kick something else out. There literally is no more time. I don't have time to get more sleep. I'm working, I have to get home, I spend some time with my family, and then before I know, before bed, I have to get more done before I go to sleep or whatever. A lot of times we think that sleep is the one area where we can get more time, but it's also one of the biggest areas of our health that can have the most detrimental impact on our health if we don't prioritize it. Okay, so time is huge. Stress is big, right? We're dealing with a lot of stress. This can impact our health in a lot of different ways. Your home situation, trying to take care of your family, kids, whatever all of your other priorities are. I mean, there's a lot of challenges that we face as working professionals, but also trying to measure up. We're trying to accomplish. We're trying to show up and be successful. And what's the cost of being very successful in our lives and getting ourselves to where we really want to be? So these are some of the common barriers that we face as working professionals. But what really is the biggest problem? The biggest problem with prioritizing our health is the lack of immediate consequences. Now think about this. What happens if we don't meet a deadline at work? What happens if we let our boss or our coworker or our employees down? What happens if we perform poorly? There are immediate repercussions for our actions at work. We might lose our job, we might get disciplined, be written up, whatever, right? There are immediate repercussions if we are not performing to the expectations that we are supposed to at work. We are being paid to do our job, and we're expected to show up. So the biggest problem with our health then is that there's not immediate consequences the majority of the time. If you have a day where all you eat is ice cream and fast food and you don't exercise and you're super stressed and you got 3 hours of sleep, what happens? Well, I mean, you might feel like you're dragging a little bit, or maybe you have so much adrenaline because you're chronically stressed that you just have learned to function living that way. And so you think that you're functioning, but internally, your body is slowly decaying and it's on its way to developing chronic illness. But we don't see those repercussions the next day. We don't show up to work. We don't have to face our body the next day and and deal with the consequences of the decisions and the choices that we made the day before. So when do we actually see the consequences of not prioritizing our health? When do these actually show up? Usually a long ways down the road. We don't see them immediately. We might see something 10 years later after we've been living, our lives a long time in an unhealthy way, living, chronically stressed, not taking care of ourselves, not giving our bodies the nutrients that we need, not exercising and keeping our heart and our veins and everything healthy, our organs healthy. Okay, we don't see them right away. Now, I wanted to share a little bit about my story of why I'm so passionate about this. The consequences of not prioritizing your health don't show up tomorrow, and they don't show up next week, and they don't show up next month, and they might not even show up next year or 5 years down the road. But the reality is that if you are not taking care of yourself and you're not prioritizing yourself, they will show up. It's just a matter of when. So when we're not doing what we should be and we're not taking care of ourselves, we can basically be reassured that something is going to happen. Are we willing to take those consequences when they come and continue to do the things that we're doing? So, a little bit about my story. Well, my story goes back to when I was 16. My parents went through a divorce when I was a teenager that was very, very devastating for me. It was very traumatic. My world crumbled essentially. I lost a lot of the close relationships in my life. I was incredibly hurt, and there was a lot going on. It was awful. And then everything since then was just a major challenge for me. My whole world had fallen apart. And so what did I do? What did I do at that point? Nobody really teaches us how to deal with these things, how in a healthy way, at least. And so what I did was I did what most humans do. And I buried the pain and I buried the hurt. And I just, figured I have to find some way to survive. And so I decided at one point during this time period that I wasn't going to allow my situation to keep me from becoming a pharmacist. That was my dream. So I started becoming hyper focused on achieving that dream and becoming a pharmacist. And what happened for me is that I essentially buried my pain, my hurt in busyness, in overachievement. I started to gain my self worth and my value from achieving so that others could see me. Oh, wow, look at Whitney. Look at what she's accomplished. Look how successful she is. Look how smart she is. All of those things was gaining my self worth from overachieving. But I pushed it a little bit too far. And I lived in a chronic stress state. And I didn't address all of the trauma and the mental and emotional things that were going on inside of myself for an extended period of time. I completed pharmacy school, I completed residency, and I got to my first job as a pharmacist at the Mayo Clinic. 9 months into that job, I started to develop a pain in both of my wrists from using the computer and doing work as a pharmacist. And I thought, hey, it's just, it was just a small injury. I'll give it a couple weeks, I'll be back to normal. Well, I wasn't lucky enough for that to be the case for me. And about 2 months later, I was severely fatigued. I was incredibly weak, and I was in so, so, so much pain as a 28-year-old with $200,000 of student loans hanging over my head. And I found myself sitting in a rheumatologist's office. I was diagnosed with rheumatoid arthritis and lupus, and it completely turned my life upside down. I could no longer do my job in the way that I needed to. I was severely restricted. I didn't have the energy and the capability to really perform my job function in the way that I needed to. I had to ride a scooter everywhere, use wheelchairs. I mean, it completely turned my life upside down. I used to be incredibly active. I always played sports, would go dancing, travel the world, you name it. I was incredibly active, and all of those things were taken away from me. Now, what's the thought that goes through my mind? What if I had lived differently then? How would my life be different now? What if? What if? Now, with the way that my life is now, I'm stuck just asking that question and trying to make the most of my life that I have now. But I also dedicate my life and my business now to making sure that you, as a working professional, do not fall into the same pitfalls as I did. I want to make sure that you never have to ask this question: what if I had lived differently then? How would my life be different now? Now, you might be thinking, well, I mean, you were diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. Like, how often does that actually happen? There's no way that's going to happen to me. I meet with hundreds of working professionals, and it's not just me. What about the world-renowned Mayo Clinic oncologist who came to me after he had already lost? He came to me after he had actually lost his marriage. He had lost his family. He had lost the ability to be able to see his son on a regular basis. And he was in a very, very, very bad mental place. He had spent his entire life dedicating himself to overachieving, to accomplishing, to becoming the best in the world. And yet he lost the one thing that was the most important to him in his life. But he wasn't prioritizing that. What about the divorce attorney who was sexually assaulted as a child when she was 4 years old? And the rest of her life, she's been gaining weight, has been severely overweight, and has not been able to kick that weight because of the trauma that's living inside of her that's been unaddressed. What about the clinical pharmacist who was raised in a very abusive home, parents who didn't love him, who didn't meet his needs? He used to disappear into the basement and binge food. Food was his friend, food was his comfort. He worked incredibly hard. He coped by achieving. He created a multi-million-dollar business. He sold that business, and at 65, he retired and became severely depressed and felt like a complete failure. The world would look at him and say, holy cow, how did you accomplish everything that you've accomplished? And hold him on this high pedestal. And yet in his mind, he was a complete failure, and he was spiraling into a deep, deep depression. What about the CEO who's been abused most of her life, lived with alcoholic parents, and now is dealing with the mental repercussions of not being able to show up for sales, of being afraid of being rejected? There's so many things. There's so many things in our lives that cause us to start to find mechanisms to cope, that help, that cause us to try to survive. It shapes us and it molds us. And what we don't realize is what we start to do to compensate. What are we doing? Are we overachieving? Are we trying to find our worth somewhere in this world? What are the things that we're doing that are keeping us from prioritizing ourselves and knowing what our worth is deep inside of ourselves. Now, what's the reality? The reality is that we all have something. Even if you're on this call and you're like, no, I haven't been through any trauma, it's like, I don't have all of that stuff. You have something. There is always something. I have people that get on calls with me all the time. The mental and emotional stuff, I don't need it. There's nothing there. As soon as we start digging, there's something there. There's always something there. There's always barriers. If you're struggling with your health, if you're struggling to prioritize yourself and truly take care of yourself, there is something there. So now we have to be able to open our minds and be willing to accept it and to be able to look, to be able to dive deep. Now, if our health is being put on the back burner, we are essentially abandoning ourselves. We are. We are not prioritizing ourselves. We are putting ourselves on the back burner. We are meeting all of the other expectations in our lives, except showing up for ourselves, doing the things that we need to do to be successful, and to be healthy as an individual. Okay. I want to go through 7 very common cultural norms and things that we face as working professionals that cause us to do the things that we're doing. Okay. So number 1 is cultural expectations of productivity. In many cultures, there's a strong emphasis on productivity and being constantly busy as a measure of worth and success. So taking time for yourself can then feel like a deviation from societal norms, leading to guilt for not adhering to these standards. Okay. So we're busy and it's feeding our worth and helping us to feel successful by staying busy. Number 2 is workplace culture and dynamics. Now, work environments that prioritize long hours and high output often implicitly or explicitly discourage taking breaks or focusing on personal well-being. Now, in these types of settings, employees might feel guilty for not matching what is required and the commitment required of their colleagues, or for seeming to put their needs above their work responsibilities. Okay, so you're feeling shame, you're feeling guilty. Perceived selfishness, a common perception that focusing on your own needs is selfish. This is incredibly common. I can't do that for myself. It's selfish, especially when compared to other responsibilities such as family, caregiving, or other career obligations. So this can lead professionals to feel guilty about dedicating time to health and wellness, fearing that it might be seen as neglecting their duties to others. This one is huge. I hear this all the time. Number 4 is role conditioning. So oftentimes from a young age, we may be conditioned to fulfill certain roles, whether it's as a provider, a caretaker, or a high achiever. And straying from these roles to focus on yourself can cause you to feel guilty, and might appear to conflict with your internalized sense of identity and responsibility. The divorce attorney that I mentioned, so her parents were very irresponsible. So from the age of 12, she actually started running the household, essentially taking care of her siblings, making sure that everything got done. And now in her career, as she stays busy as an attorney, she overachieves, but she puts too much work on her plate because she feels like she has to take care of everything. She has to do everything. So it's very hard to delegate. Fear of missing out. In highly competitive work environments, taking time for health can lead to fears of missing out on opportunities, falling behind peers, or appearing less dedicated. This can induce guilt as professionals worry about the potential career costs of prioritizing their health. Okay, so then we feel like we're losing. We're missing out because we're trying to prioritize ourselves. It's a negative. It's this, it gives a very negative feeling to prioritize ourselves. Internalized work ethic. So some individuals have an internalized belief that success comes from relentless work and that any time not spent working is wasted. I work with so many professionals where we have to actually schedule time into their day to do nothing. And it is incredibly uncomfortable, but you have to start learning that relentless work is not healthy. It's not serving you. This mindset can make it difficult to justify time spent on non-work activities, and health and your fitness fall into those. Now, number 7 is feedback and validation. If the feedback loop at work continuously rewards overworking without acknowledging the importance of balance, professionals may feel validated in neglecting self care. Taking time for themselves, in contrast to what is rewarded, can induce feelings of guilt. Okay. So there's tons of things. This is just 7, right? And 7 most common things that we deal with as working professionals as to why in the world we abandon ourselves. Why do we always put ourselves on the back burner? Well, because there's an incredible amount of pressures and societal norms and expectations that cause us to feel like bringing ourselves forward and putting ourselves as number one on the priority list is shameful, and that it's selfish, and that we should feel guilty for doing it. It's incredibly uncomfortable for the majority of working professionals that have been busy and have been conforming to these norms for the majority of their careers. So, what's the problem here? What's the real problem here? The real problem is that we do not truly value ourselves and understand our worth. We do not know how to truly show up for ourselves. But why? Like, why don't we know how to show up for ourselves? Why, when these norms and these expectations come, do we always conform? We're never really taught this in our lives. We're never really taught how to show up for ourselves, how to show up for ourselves emotionally, physically, and how to truly value ourselves from a deep perspective. Now you might be thinking, I just want to get healthy and lose some weight. Why in the world are we talking about this? Why does this matter? Well, if we look at this image of an iceberg, this was an image that was created by a physician named John W. Travis. Okay. He was the trailblazer for wellness. He created the first ever wellness center, and he related our health and wellness to an iceberg. Now, you'll see at the top is the state of our physical health. This is the 10% above the surface that we can actually see. Maybe our weight, blood, lab values that we can measure, our glucose, our blood pressure, our cholesterol, whatever, right? This is the physical state of our health. Okay. Now, when we try to get healthy, the majority of the time we're chipping away at the tip of the iceberg, and we're having very little success. We're not sticking with it very long. We might get some results and we still end up right back where we started from. And the problem is that we're never actually diving below the surface. We're never actually looking at what's driving our behaviors. Why are we doing the things that we're doing? Why are we living the lifestyle that we're living? Where does it come from? Where did all of that come from? How did we develop it? What about our psychological and motivational level? What actually motivates us? Are we only concerned about the number on the scale, or do we actually genuinely uh, care about taking care of ourselves and being healthy? And this last bottom one, our spiritual being and meaning realm. Who in the world are we? And how do we start showing up for this person? Because when we truly know who we are, when we truly love ourselves, when we truly value ourselves at a deep, deep level, we don't allow the societal norms and the excessive expectations to take us away from ourselves. We don't allow ourselves to be put on the back burner. So, where did we lose our sense of self then? Or did we ever have it? We're never taught these things. We're never taught how to show up for ourselves, but we're human. We want to be loved. We want to feel needed and valued. We want to feel worthy. We want to be accepted. We want to fit in. We want to be good enough. We want to accomplish. We want to feel valuable. We want to look successful. All of these things. That's human nature. We want these things. And so we do whatever it takes to accomplish these things, and we kill ourselves doing it. But in reality, we spend our whole lives trying to be good enough. But all of this would disappear if we genuinely knew how to truly love and value ourselves, that we prioritized ourselves because we understand our worth and we understand that we, above everything else in our lives, deserve to be healthy. Now, I want you to do something really quick. I want to do an exercise with you. I want you to take a couple minutes, not a couple minutes, a couple of seconds. I want you to take just a short period of time here. I want you to get a pen. I want you to get a piece of paper. And I want you to write down your top 5 priorities from 1 to 5. 1 being the most important thing in your life, your top number 1 priority, down to number 5. What are your top 5 priorities? So take just a minute to write these priorities down. Now, as you're thinking about them, as you're thinking about these priorities and you're starting to write them down, where do you fall on the list? Are you even on the list? Is your health on the priority list? Are you on the priority list? Now, the majority of working professionals that I work with, they don't even show up on the list. They're not on the list. So what we have to do is we have to start to make a shift. We have to start to figure out, who are we really? How do we really start to show up for ourselves? And the very first thing, the biggest thing that I want you to take away from this webinar is to take everything on your priority list and move it down 1. And you put you and your health at number 1 on the list. You are your number 1 priority. Your health should be your number 1 priority. And when you have taken care of yourself, everything else can fall into place. But if things are coming up and you look, you know, people are asking you to do things, there's expectations, you're trying to take on other things, you first look at your list of priorities and you say, I'm number 1, maybe my family is number 2, what, you know, however it falls, my kids and my husband, whatever, right? If all of this stuff coming in compromises any of your top priorities, then the answer is no. That thing, whatever it is, it does not get time or space in your life. Not if it is sacrificing your top priorities. So that is the biggest takeaway of how you actually start to be successful with winning back your health. You have to start prioritizing yourself. You are the number 1 priority in your life. It's time to start showing up for the person inside. For the one person who really and truly physically can never abandon you. And yet, from a mental and emotional standpoint and a physical health standpoint, we are abandoning on a regular basis. It is time to start showing up. And when you decide to start showing up for you as your number 1 priority, this is when the shift starts to happen. This is when your lifestyle starts to change. This is when you start actually sticking to your goals and when you actually start getting long-term results. You start to stick to something for more than just a couple weeks or a couple months because it starts to become who you are, that you realize that you deserve it, that you actually and your health are the most important thing in your life. Now, if this has resonated with you, I want to share really quickly before we finish up here what I actually do with working professionals. Now, I have a whole health transformation program. It's 16 weeks long. And what we do in that program is help you to really transform your health from the inside out. We help you to overcome the mental and emotional barriers that have gotten you to where you are and that are keeping you stuck. And until you overcome those things, you will not be successful in the long term. There will always be something that comes back that brings you back to the exact same place because the same things are driving your behavior. This is such an important part of the journey. Now, the second thing that we do is that we help you to master nutrition and exercise. We give you enough education that you can actually do this for the rest of your life, that you don't have to pay for a coach and getting help and doing diets the rest of your life. And the last thing is to truly develop habits that last a lifetime. And this, this is really a skill. This is not something where it's like, okay, if I just do it long enough, it'll become a habit and I'll do it forever. No, this still has to come from inside of us. We still have to have our motivation coming from the right place. So if this resonated with you and you would like to explore this a little bit further and get help on your journey, you can go ahead and visit my website and book a free strategy session today. So from this webinar, I will do a 60-minute session with you where we'll dive into where you're at with your health, with your life, with your career, what it looks like, and what are those barriers? What are the things that are keeping you stuck? Why are they keeping you stuck? And how can we help you to get unstuck and really begin prioritizing yourself and realizing your own worth, your own value, and putting you, instead of being on the back burner, as the front priority in your life. Okay. So if you're interested in this, please feel free to go to my website, mywholeandhappylife.com, and book a call. I would love to talk with you. But that is the end of our webinar today. I hope that this was beneficial for you. I hope that there are some things that were new, that were different, things that you didn't realize before, that helped you to realize that in order to really change your health, you've got to take a deeper dive. You've got to figure out why you're doing the things that you're doing. And you've got to start prioritizing yourself and showing up for yourself, truly valuing yourself more than you value everything else in your life. That's what's required to make sure that you are at the top of your priority list. Okay. Now, please, if you have any questions, if you would like to talk to me, please reach out. You can always reach out on my website. This is my email, wprude@mywholeandhappylife.com. Feel free to reach out, message me on LinkedIn or Instagram, wherever you can find me. Just search for my name or My Whole and Happy Life. I would absolutely love to talk with you. So thank you again for joining me for this webinar, and I hope that I get to talk to you soon.